Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to think loud, not to talk, but think loud about the costs of the open source software, or about the price you have to pay in one or the other way if you are using the free and open source software, of course. My name is Jachym, and I do somehow everything which is related to geographical information systems, or GIS, and maps, together, and open source. Those two topics are somehow close to me. I'm somehow active in the Open Source Geospatial Foundation, osgeo.org. I used to be a board member, a year ago, and now I'm just the secretary. And I was active, or I am active in various open source projects for geospatial. I started with GraphsGIS, which is a software tool still being developed, but it started in 1982. I don't know where you have been in 1992. But this is the time where GraphsGIS is born. I'm started the PyWPS project. Graphs is in C, PyWPS is obviously in Python, open layers. I have some contributions there too. It's just JavaScript and so on. Now I work as a technical consultant at Clear company. What do we do? You've probably seen it already. We do map information system or geographical information systems for assets, for property management. And we try to combine somehow the map, so map-centric view of the data, together with the so-called data-centric view of the data. That means we combine a map together with a table as much as possible. And, of course, the whole system runs on mobile phones and web browsers. And apparently, we are using lots of open source. I do open source. I am the open source developer. I started in 2003. And sometimes it's a hard work. It's a hard job. Wow. Sorry. I joined some of my experiences, or some experiences I've done through the years. I've learned in the PyWPS project. This is a relatively small project. There are only not more than 40 contributors. It's a small team. However, the project is here for 10 years already. And it's still living and slowly growing, and we are about to release a new version right now. So I would call it a successful open source project, at least as it is to me right now. So what are the costs of open source? If someone tells you that open source or free software is for free, so why to pay, right? Run away. It's not true. Yeah, everybody knows there is no such thing as a free lunch. In this talk, I would like to touch the point of view at the open source and free software from the business point or individual developer or society. Business, developer, and society. Because there are different costs and benefits from each of this point of view or points. If you are using it, the software, or if you are producing it. So first, let's talk about business. And let's talk about costs first. I don't know how many of you are familiar with those graphs. Originally, I studied forest engineering, and we had a basics in economy. So I saw it a few times. And the theory says that there are two kinds of costs, so-called fixed costs. Those are the costs you need to spend anyhow to get certain amount of units into production, or units of whatever. You have to build, for example, a fabric. So you can produce something, so you can produce a car, and it actually doesn't matter how many cars you are going to produce, because up to certain amount of cars per month, you still need the house built, right? Or you need to buy some software package. And the costs do not change whether you use it or not. And whether how many lines of code you are going to write in the text editor you had to pay for. Or if you are just like having it on your hard drive and not using it at all. So those would be the fixed costs. And then there are those variable costs, which correspond exactly to the amount of the product or units of the product you want to produce. If you put them together, you have so-called total costs. That would be the sum of the fixed cost and the variable costs. We can observe lately that there is a change right now happening of charging for the software. You are not anymore usually required to pay lots of money for a license of a software, but you are asked for some continuous paying. So you are prepaying the software for some time period, so you pay more, but smaller amount. One of the examples would be Office 365 from Microsoft. Well, I just want to say it's happening. There is a certain change. You don't have to spend too much money at once at the beginning. So it's true that buying if you would be buying the free and open source software, you spend almost zero money as a starting investment. So basically, yes, you have a free lunch there, but do you really? Let's have a look at the costs from the production and using point of views in the business still. And keep in mind that open source is not a business model, by the way. So it's not about how you sell things. It's about how you do things. By obtaining any software package, you are facing the costs for like getting the software, training it, training people to be able to work with it. For management and actualization of the software, you have to manage the licenses somehow usually. You have to test it, test the whole environment, and so on. By proprietary software, the costs for getting the software are usually high. If you want to buy Oracle database, it costs you something. At least relatively high. The costs are relatively high compared to the open source software, of course. Okay. I have lots of text here, but what I wanted to demonstrate basically is that that would be the proprietary software cost in the time, right? So you have to make the investment at the beginning, so the costs should be relatively high. Then there is then you are using it in time, you have to invest in training and, updating and stuff like that, and keeping it. And the curve is usually by proprietary software, as my experience says, it's not so steep. But then there is a new version upgrade, right? You have to buy a new version. For example, in my domain, ArcGIS would be an example. You have to invest another load of money to get it up. And you usually have to change your system so the curve is more steep again, because you have to rewrite things, you have to learn them, and so on. By open source software, you have to download the data from Git, so the initial costs are close to zero, but you have to invest in learning, right? Learning stuff. You have to read the documentation and so on. But then when there is a new version, my experience is usually it's not so steep anymore, because there are not so many changes, they are backwards compatible, and so on. You could be prepared on it. However, during this time period, there could be several versions of open source software, so maybe it would get higher. Or maybe if you have a proprietary solution, like, for example, Oracle database, why not? You know that you go for Oracle because, it's the best. But you have several options in the free and open source domain, and if you invest one man's time in a month to get oriented, So the initial cost could be somewhere here maybe, because you have to make the choice and you have to invest the time, and people are the most expensive costs you will probably have. So this is the ideal state, but it doesn't necessarily have to look like that, right? The cost of getting the open source software could be much higher than getting the proprietary, because, as I mentioned again, if you buy how is it called? Microsoft Office. Yeah, sorry. I use LaTeX usually. If you buy Microsoft Office, you simply know there is no place for making a choice. But in the open source world, and if you are making a big decision for a big company, it probably will cost you more time. So there's always things to be considered. But there are some big advantages in deploying free and open source software. Yeah, you get as a benefit, the costs are lower apparently, initial cost. Probably some feature you are missing. You don't have to wait for a new version because someone else will implement it for you. There is a support from community. You will make common good just by using open source software, and you can recruit new people from the community. There is this rule: release early, release often, or repo. It basically means upgrade early and upgrade often for you, because the release early and release often, this is for software producers, but this is the conclusion for you as a user, and that also means fix early and fix often. If you are using open source software, which is being released according to this rule, you will have to face this. You will have to make another investments, and this is probably how you will look like while running pip upgrade or npm install or whatever apt-get dist upgrade and so on. You have to fix things all the time, which is actually more annoying in JavaScript. This is one example. I just had chance to went through it. We are using OpenLayers library. This is a great Swiss Army knife tool in JavaScript for working with geospatial data on web. And then, suddenly between version 3.13 and 3.14, they make this there was a little note at the end of the changelog. By the way, we just changed the event model. We are moving away from the closure dependency and so on. Result was 6 man-months of development time, of my time particularly, to get our software work with one of the base libraries, which was pretty expensive for the open source software, right? And by the way, meanwhile, OpenLayers went to 3.19 version. Yeah, this is how it looked. Bunks. If you are producing open source software, it costs you also something. If you are generally producing software, there are direct costs like making the software, making the programming. Then there are some indirect costs like you have to fix some bugs you actually don't care about, you have to test it, you have to write the documentation. You have to translate it, give support, stuff like that. Some of the costs can be moved. Actually, you don't probably see here anything. The costs were moved to community. So let someone else do it for you. If you open your sources, anybody can do it. And people are usually coming and getting it. So community helps you to build a software. But building a community is hard work too, actually. That actually means another additional cost for you. You need a manager who will take care for the community. You have to invest time in answering on forums and on mailing lists, stuff like that. There is a philosophy, so to say, or how to be good open source citizen, or there is a fair trade open source theme. So behave the fair trade way. If you are using open source software as a company, contribute back with a code, with money, because developers of open source software, they need some money too in order to make their living. Support in anyhow the software you are using and make it to your company's culture. Me, personally, never managed any company I was working for to successfully to adopt free and open source software way of doing things. Well, shame on me, sorry. It's not so easy. Okay, very shortly, how does it look from the developer's point of view? Using and contributing to free and open source software, it gives you some freedom, you've probably heard about, of course, fun, and you feel you are a member of community, and community, they became friends sometime, and yeah, friends with everything, what belongs to it. And you are never alone with the community. Working for a company which is open source positive, it's about freedom. You can combine various tools. There's no vendor lock for you personally. You are building your own community impact, so there is a chance you probably might get a better job. And you have a freedom to leave with actually all the stuff you are developing, you have developed, stored in GitHub, so your hands are never empty. But there are some bad parts too. Autonomy. The first, this is actually good, right? Because writing open source teaches you how to solve problems, how to look in the forums, how to Google, how to ask questions. I actually started when there was no Stack Overflow too. But this skill is great as long as you are alone. But once you get part of the larger team, they're not so good anymore because you are not used to discuss with people, to share your minds, or because usually you are doing things, right? You are not talking about them. Because talking on the mailing list, it takes just endless time, and usually the one who implements the feature, the one is in charge then. But if you are working in a larger team, you have to learn how to talk to people again. So this would be the bad part of being open source developer. And of course, you are facing great danger of burnout. Because this is my reality in PyWPS. This is how many people think it works, but this is the reality how open source software is being produced, usually. And why burnout? Because you are putting all your energy into something you seriously care about. And someday you find out simply that it was too much and you can't go anymore. And yeah, it happened to me several times too. I'm on time? Okay. Case study PyWPS project. Those would be the last 2 years commits. And there is like from 0 to 75 commits in a month. What does it influence? Yeah, I had no energy, I had to invest time in family, I had no free time, I had to do my job, I had to make some money, for example, and so on. So those would be the periods when you are slowly, I wasn't burning out, but apparently I had no time. And if you want to work continuously on a project, you simply have to commit every day, well, in the ideal case, of course. So my message would be, keep in mind, you have to keep on yourself at the first place too, because otherwise it doesn't help to the project either. And then you can be useful for the community or in your project. That applies for software project, that applies for PyCon or Python, Czech Python community too, or any other community. Okay, last topic. From the point of view of the society and education and public sector. Just very short. I believe that preferring free and open source should be enforced by law, particularly in Czech Republic. Yeah, to be used in public administration. And those would be one of the reasons. Firstly, the public gets the control back. They are totally lower cost because there are many companies which can compete with the same software solution, basically, but there are then other services around which can be offered. That could be the place for competition. And there is no vendor locking, which is a great problem. And if we would prefer free and open source software in education, well, it's obvious. More students can get the software, they can experiment, they can play with it, they can learn. We should teach the people principles, not software packages. So we should teach about GIS, not ArcGIS. We should teach about typography and word processing and not Microsoft Word. Nothing against Microsoft Word, by the way. It leads to autonomy, responsibility, and of course, community feeling. Case study Opencart Prague. I don't know how many of you are from Czech Republic. For those who are not, it was a project, it lasted like 10 years, which is pretty long actually, and there was only one vendor, and he owned the whole source code, and all the copyrights even to the project itself. It's supposed to be the card of the Prague guy, in Prague living person. You should use it for public transport, for libraries, for theaters. At the end, there were like 3 functions, or maybe 2 functions, not 20 of planned. And it costs 1 billion of crowns, nearly. And the result, in 2016, it was easier and cheaper to drop the project and start from scratch. My comment is, we had a great-looking, promising public administration project, and this is how it ended up. All of a sudden. Why that? I mean, it was a great tool, right? High-quality solution. Well, it was proprietary. Last thoughts. How can it work? How come that free and open source software can work? How come it is still there? Because how come that there is no big competition between companies contributing to one software package and providing support for the same software package, basically? How come that people get paid for it somehow? Those would be the thoughts of Paul Ramsey. Paul Ramsey is the initial author of PostGIS. This is the extension to PostgIS. If you want to save or store spatial data in a relational database, you will always take PostgIS and PostGIS unless you are not Oracle and Oracle Spatial. And Paul Ramsey says that FOSS4G works. FOSS4G means free and open source software for geospatial. And it works because you get what you pay for, everyone gets what you pay for, and you get what everyone else pays for. Thank you for your attention, and may the FOSS be with you.
I'm sorry I hijacked the question part. You saw the questions disappearing. That's our moderator who decided that enough is enough. So she corrects my fails. When you were talking about contributing by code, by money, by giving support to the community, and then the burnout, I was thinking about the past weeks when we were preparing this event, and I thought, yeah, we're contributing to the community, and then we're burning out. We were, going crazy in the past 2 weeks.
Yep.
So, but we are open source. That's true. Like anybody can help us. Anybody can become active in the community, and it works. People are coming to us and wanting to help and volunteering and so on. So this was like a summary of how we actually became to be here today. So thanks. That was very nice. Do we have any serious questions? What?
The first one is pretty great.
Yeah.
Do you want to comment on that? Maybe not. I'm scared.
Hello, this is not going to be about the bird, sorry. But I'd like to ask whether the FOSS4G, the funding model, like you get what you pay for, does it really work? Like, is there a developer being paid from these contributions?
FOSS4G software, particularly. I would be speaking about FOSS software. I actually wanted to ask how many people are here from Red Hat. Yeah, quite a few. And you guys are paid usually for working on, at least some time, on open source software. So, to me, yes, it works. People are paid for working on open source software, but truth is that I'm observing two models, and the more successful one is that there is always a big company, big dictator. Basically, one is located in Europe and the other in US, so there's no big competition. And they are both investing really money into people working on the software. The example would be GeoServer in my domain. And they are like making just normal business with it, but with the open culture, the open development model. Another example would be GraphGIS. There is no single company, well, there are companies offering commercial support for Graphs, but the development core, they are really just volunteers, basically people working in academia, at universities and research centers, and yeah, that works completely different way. Then there is QGIS, which is a mixture of both, but still, simply there is an ecosystem of companies really making money with it and investing back. That works pretty well. But of course, that would be the core people, but then there is like, I don't know, 90 to 70% of really volunteering work. So people are not paid for it. Anyhow.
There's a question, what higher level language would you recommend to learn right after Python? Or is it the norm?
High level language. Well, guys, I'm a forester, so my expertise is somewhere else, but basically how to cut trees. But I would recommend you not to leave Python. Yeah, well, the point is, if you are considering higher language, you were probably not going to C, which would be a natural step probably for me if you want to be more efficient. I would totally not advise you to go to JavaScript because it is, as mentioned earlier in this morning, is a swamp. It's a moving sand, as I used to say. Every month you would have to change your whole stack completely because, well, they have invented lately a new great software package or a new great library like React. Everybody's using React now. But 2 years ago, everybody was using Google Closure. Therefore, if you want to have your head clean, don't use JavaScript. If you need to use JavaScript, do it on full time. You have to be into it. And stick to Python if it works for you. Why to change? I mean, Python is pretty universal, and we are not using Python as a main programming language. We are using it as a clue for the other libraries, for the other tools, because every usable tool has now Python binding somehow. Therefore, it's a great, well, yeah, as I say, glue, yeah, to make things together. Yeah.
And the last question, how to effectively convince companies that use open software projects to finish aid those projects or those people behind them?
I had a comment on that. This one. I don't know. It doesn't work. Because either the people are open-minded, and it's pretty easy. They are looking for ways how to do it already, and you just show them the way because you are expert, right? You are contributing to open source. You know how the communities are working. You know the people in the community. I know you. You know me. So there is already a relationship between us, and we can together. You would know that if there would be something regarding geospatial domain, you would probably ask me, do it, right? And you will just show the way to your boss, who is already open-minded. But if the boss doesn't see, if it isn't his way or her way, you are never going to convince them. So it's a waste of energy, I think.
Thank you very much.
It was sad. Maybe the first question.